Hi everyone, this is Jennifer Kramer and this is my special topic presentation for Northern Illinois University's Soc Class 354. My topic of interest was cohabitation, and since I am a cohabiter myself, I was curious to know if high college debt promoted cohabitation. This is important because it's a new trend in our culture. It's a trend that goes against the grain and is now becoming more acceptable and not so taboo. And I think it's important to look at the reasons why young people are delaying marriage, because this will have implications for me, this will have implications for you, and future generations to come. So, the first study I looked into was published in 2014 by a gentleman named Fanata Otto, which, if I mess up his name, I am very sorry, Mr. Otto, very sorry. But he started his research in 1996 and continued through 2009. And what he did was he surveyed a national adolescent sample ages 12 to 16 in the US, and he surveyed the same adolescents every year until their 20th to 25th birthday, depending on when they started the study. And so this is important because he's studying the same group of people. He's not studying different adolescents throughout the course of his research. And they were asked about their work experience, education, outstanding debt, and their relationships. So after excluding certain participants from the study, because he excluded people missed consecutive that missed consecutive surveys, and he also decided to exclude people who got married or cohabited or lived with their significant others before turning 20. That the remaining sample he had left after those exclusions found that they were less likely to have completed college. And he found that based on the information that his research had given him, that these surveys had given him, that credit card debt was more likely with both men and women than educational debt, and that college graduates are less likely to cohabit. Rather, they transition into marriage, which I thought was really interesting because I thought it would have been the other way around. And he also found out that low skilled men and women or low wage workers have experienced the largest decline in the likelihood of being married. So, once asked about this, the cohabitors viewed living together as more economically responsible, and it was easier to maintain one residence than it was to take care of two residents. And they said that their finances really did influence their decisions to cohabit. Debt accumulation has also been a part of achieving this financial independence and social mobility. Um, the acquisition of debt in young adults, he found, might contribute to the delay in marriage because he's finding that once you're married, you're acquiring your spouse's debt. And he found that the people that took the survey that didn't cohabit were more likely to marry if the debt was low or non existent. So I also looked into a couple other studies as well. And this study I thought was interesting. It was by Ariel Cooperberg and published in 2014. And based on her studies, she found that couples who cohabit get divorced more over couples who don't live together before marriage. And she also found out that women who cohabit with their spouses before marriage were 3 times less likely to get their college degrees. And if you were keeping up with me, this kind of goes into what we were just talking about, where if you don't go to college or you're not getting educated, then those people are more likely to move in together compared to college graduates, which I thought was really interesting. So, and then the last study that I looked at here was by a couple gentlemen, Matthew Painter and John Bessa, published in 2012, and they found that married individuals who cohabit once before marriage with their future spouse had a financial advantage because they accumulate more wealth over time than those who didn't. And I was really curious to know why that might have been. And he believes, or I should say, rather, they believe that this is because of their habits that they had when they were cohabiting with their spouses. Because when you couples who were cohabiting tend to maintain self-interest, especially with their finances, and that transfers over into marriage, and that makes sense. So the next couple things we're going to talk about is how the media portrays cohabiting. So I looked into a New York Times article published in 2007 on cohabiting, and they took a very different approach to this particular article. They interviewed couples who were uh, cohabiting together and asked them questions in reference to why they're making the decisions that they're making. And these couples had a couple things in common. Finances. They again said that the finances made a big impact in this because it was easier to maintain one residence than it was to have two residences. It was more expensive. And one couple said that they didn't want to be in their late 20s with roommates. They kind of wanted to grow up and be on their own. Another couple that did move in together said that they married after 2 years of living together. And again, they said it made financial sense for them to do so. So that's why they made those decisions. And I'd be really curious to know, that was published in 2017, if those couples are still together, if they're broken up. I'd like to know about that. And then I'm going to go a different direction here, but the Chicago Tribune published an article saying how cohabiting couples has grown by 550%, which I thought was really interesting. But they talked about an aspect of cohabiting that I never thought about before, but kind of makes sense and it goes in with what we're talking about. They believe that older generations are cohabiting more than younger generations. And they also took an interview approach with this particular article as well. So the older generations are now cohabiting and saying that the reason that they were cohabiting was because marriage wasn't necessarily a necessity. They believe that marriage was a necessity for young people because they want to get married and they want to have kids. And it doesn't make sense for older people to do that because they've already experienced those things. They said that marriage comes with a certain amount of history, as far as ex spouses or kids, inheritance, as far as debt. And they also made a good point of some men and women don't want to fill those roles. They don't want to be the breadwinner or they don't want to be the caretaker. So those things are no longer a necessity. They're already established and they don't need that support. And they make the argument that young people do these things. They get married or cohabit because it makes financial sense to do so, or they have that stability behind them with somebody who doesn't. I mean, even when you're still cohabiting, you still have the option to leave, but decide to get married because it's more of a commitment. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And throughout this entire research, the to kind of compare and contrast what I was reading, it was interesting how the scholarly articles discussed moving in together as a positive and a negative, and how the media portrays cohabiting as a financial necessity and marriage as something that only young people do. The scholarly articles and media discuss the positive reasons for couples who are cohabiting, and they differ in the sense that the scholarly articles don't discuss the necessities for marriage in order to raise a family and pay off student debt. So, overall, I was happy with this project. I was happy with the amount of information that I found. It I was obviously wrong with my assumptions because I assumed that couples are moving in together to alleviate some of that debt, and based on the research, it turns out that that's not true. So, thank you very much.